listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome to the GM Shuffle. Dave Ross alongside Geoff Schwartz. Of course, the GM Shuffle is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Geoff, getting oh so close, my friend. Almost to the end of July. Some teams already reporting. We know how all this goes. And we also know, and you know this very well, that sometimes you're trying to get those deals done before you get to those camps. So you really can solidify those rosters. And I wanted to start the show today there, Geoff. Is there an impetus on the team to get it done more so than the player? Or is this truly a two-way street of like, hey, let's get this thing done. We don't want this lingering into August any further than it's already gone on?
Well, I think players would happily miss a week of camp if they could. I mean, I think TJ Watt would be okay if this was done August 1st, but I think there's a rush for both sides, right? The player wants to secure the money as soon as possible. I think we all want to secure the money as soon as possible. You want to be now, Watt's already financially set, but guys like Trey Smith and Karlaftis are not, right? So you want to get that deal done, and you really don't want it to be a distraction for training camp from the player side and the team side, right? You don't want to go to training every day in training camp. The press, you have a press conference, right? The press is there, it's available, and every day that the superstar's not there, you get asked about it. You have to talk about it. Your team has to talk about it. So I think there's idea to get it done as quickly as possible before camp starts. You don't want holdouts. And then, of course, you want these guys to be practicing. There's less practices now. There's more days off. So every day that your right guard is not in the lineup, that's a backup right guard that's playing with Patrick Mahomes, right? Every day that TJ Watt's not on the field, a backup pass rusher is working with Derek Harmon and Cam Hayward. You want your guys in there. So it makes a lot of sense to do it now. There's no actual deadline, but it does feel like an artificial deadline is always right before training camp. Now, Trey Smith is different. He was on the franchise tag. There was an actual deadline for July 15th. But for Watt, it made a lot of sense to do it now, secure that deal, get ready for training camp, no distractions, full speed ahead. And so I get why they did it now. I get why the Chiefs have extended their guys, why the Jets have done it. So this is sort of, again, not an artificial deadline, but just sort of like, let's kind of get it done now.
And they did get it done, as you mentioned, with Watt, $123 million extension with the Steelers. So that deal is officially done. He's the highest non-paid quarterback in the history of the NFL. Money well spent. Like, you look at this now, you bring in Aaron Rodgers. We talked a lot about the Steelers in the offseason. We thought a deal would get done with TJ Watt. It has been done now. And obviously you bring over Jalen Ramsey in that trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So it's going to be a new look to the defense. But as long as I guess you have TJ Watt, you got to feel pretty good about where you start defensively with the Steelers.
Look, the Steelers are a top-heavy-ish team, right? They have a lot of superstars that demand money. They're an older, sort of their stars are older on defense. There are some young guys, right? Porter's there, and drafted Harmon, got a young linebacker or two, but it's a very sort of top-heavy roster, right? With the salaries and with the older players. So they're going to rely on those guys to have a lot of production. And my concern with Pittsburgh, and it's not, they should have signed one no matter what. They had to do it, is, again, the older you get, the more injured you tend to get, the more your body breaks down, the longer it is to recover from injury. If they lose a couple guys on this defensive line, they're cooked on defense. Like, they don't have the depth right now that other teams do. And not every team has depth, but for a team that wants to contend, that's my concern with Pittsburgh. Is if a couple guys get hurt on defense, who's backfilling that? You could say that backfill happens on offense, right? We score more points offensively. We don't have to worry about some losses on defense. I'm just not sure that's going to happen offensively either.
$108 million fully guaranteed at the signing, $123 million over 3 years here. And that signing bonus, again, on day one is $40 million for TJ Watt. So, again, you mentioned it. Look, this is unlike baseball, right, where you do have a salary cap. So when you spend for guys, we know the cap goes up, and so that changes the dynamic there. This is what the Steelers and where they have chosen to spend this money. And, again, their own, right? They drafted him. He's become the player that, one of the, I'd say, top three players defensively in the league, make that argument. Yeah. And now they've paid him. Do you think, though, that this is a short window now for the Steelers, Geoff, that you say because of that money that you're alluding to that they've allocated, that window is not going to stay open very long when you spend these type of salaries?
Well, it's a 1 year window because Aaron Rodgers is going to play for one more year. And then you have to get a new quarterback. And then you don't know where your window goes from there. So yeah, it's a 1 year window. Watt's deal looks like it's actually 2 years. Remember, you have to read the fine print with these deals, right? Where deal gets announced and all of a sudden you see the fine print, and most often, if it's a 4 year deal, it's really 2.5 or 3 years. If it's a 3 year deal, it's more like a 2 year deal. So yeah, it's this window right now. Maybe Rodgers doesn't retire if things go well this season, but he's pretty, it's hinted at this is his last season. So then you have again Cam Hayward. Is this his last season as well? How much longer does Watt play? Ramsey, Slay, some of the older middle linebacker. Like, how do you continue to make this, to roll? So I think it's a 1 year thing. This is why, again, the Steelers really had two options this year, right? It was rebuild on the fly, admit this is going to be a down year, save money, hoard it, get ready for next draft, give a ton of draft picks, move around, be flexible, rebuild the roster next offseason. Or what they've done is they've gone all in. This is besides the Watt deal, right? The Watt deal was going to be done no matter what.
Right.
But they've gone all in on this roster. And it will, when I say all in, I mean, for Pittsburgh with six Super Bowls, it's Super Bowl or bust. It has to be the way they think about it. He's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. After the season, they have to do another reset. Okay, where do we go from here? So it does feel like, to your question, it's a 1 year window. This is it.
You and I talked about it last week in the GM Shuffle here. Trey Smith was the last player that was playing on the franchise tag, no longer. They do get that done. They beat the deadline there. 4-year extension, $94 million there, $76 million guaranteed, highest guarantee ever for an NFL guard. Do they call that Geoff Schwartz money now, Geoff?
I wish, man. I'll tell you what. I got in 2014, I got the second highest guard contract. I think it was the second highest. 2014 NFL free agency. And I was like, oh man, sign me up for that. And now I would make, I think, a lot more money. I would make I make a lot more money if I was playing now. So look, good for Trey, obviously. Look, his story is one that I think you feel happy for a player getting paid like this, right? So remember, he was a 5-star recruit. Okay, he was like the number one rated player in 2017. I believe that was the year. Goes to Tennessee, starts as a true freshman. And I think they played in that Georgia Bowl Classic Peach Bowl game. He had a great pancake blocker, I remember, first game ever. He then gets blood clots. He misses some time at Tennessee. He then actually comes back and plays a lot to end his career there. There's concern about the blood clots. Drops him from first-round pick to a 6th-round pick. He ends up going to Kansas City. He's worked his way up to being a Pro Bowl level player, a 2-time Super Bowl champion. And so he deserves this money. I know deserve is maybe not right the word used, but he earned this contract. Put it like that. He earned this contract. When they franchise tagged him, he was going to get a new deal. The deal's in place now. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm happy for him. I know him personally a little bit. He was on my Big Boys Club show, and I'm very pleased he was able to get this deal.
Yeah, money well spent. Normally, inside guys, sometimes they don't get the same thing as the outside tackles get, but highest paid guard in the history of the NFL right now. Speaking of money well spent, what about George Karlaftis? They have upped him now, 4-year deal there. They're giving out some contracts this week in Kansas City, $93 million extension. That does include a $62 million fully guaranteed bonus there. What about the Chiefs keeping some of their core guys? I know they flipped over the offensive line to a degree, but it does feel like some of the key guys they're bringing back and going to try to run this back and make a run for 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, so the Karlaftis thing is interesting. Again, it's reading the fine print. It does feel like a 2-year deal. The actual guaranteed money is far less than actually reported. Because remember, you guarantee for skill and for injury. There are 2 separate guarantees in there. Yeah. This feels like a situation where the Chiefs have sort of struck out for the most part on drafting defensive ends in the last 7 years or so, really in the sort of Brett Veach era. And Karlaftis is not a strikeout. Now, is he an all-world player? No. But in most years, you get around 10 sacks, and you want to pay the players you've drafted and developed to impact positions. So defensive end's one of them, left tackle, cornerback, quarterback, right, wide receiver. You want to pay those guys because they're impact players, and it's good for team morale. It's good to reward your front office who found Karlaftis. You draft them, and the coaches developed him. So it makes a lot of sense to get this deal done with. Now, again, he's not the best player ever, and they didn't pay him like that. They paid him, I think, because of the reasons I mentioned.
We mentioned last week on the show Garrett Wilson getting a new deal for the Jets, and in that same draft class was Sauce Gardner. Remember, Garrett Wilson, of course, was Offensive Rookie of the Year. Sauce Gardner was Defensive Rookie of the Year. So they hit on those picks. They're keeping them both. You re-sign Wilson, and now you give a record-setting extension to Sauce Gardner, 4 years, $120.4 million, highest paid cornerback in the history of the NFL. Geoff, I'm not surprised that they did this, but is Sauce – great name, great nickname, really good player. Is he a great player and worth that money that the Jets have given him?
Absolutely. It's the same principle I just said, right? Where if you draft and develop these superstars, you want to pay them. You want them to be the core of your roster. You want those guys to be the leaders, the guys that the locker room turns to, the guys that coaches can count on. I mentioned this earlier. I think it was last week, AFC East. The best thing the Jets have done all offseason is quiet. They've been quiet, and they've paid their best players, which is what you want to do. And then also, too, again, you want to set your salary cap. No one wants to play under the franchise tag. I know this wasn't a franchise tag situation, but it's an example of just let's pay the player earlier than later. Cowboys, hello, it costs you money. The longer you wait to pay someone, you pay the player, you put them on the books, you have it in your salary cap, and now you can structure your team around that. That's why the franchise tag is detrimental, I think, for ownership and for players, right? Players don't want to play on a one-year deal. Ownership doesn't want to have a $23 million tag hit on their books. So get it done early. You spread the money out over the year or over the life of the contract. Remember, the Jets next year presumably will have a young quarterback on a rookie contract. So it makes everyone essentially cheaper, right? You can afford everyone else. So I like what they did here, and it makes a lot of sense.
It does seem too, right? When you draft well and then re-up those guys, give the extensions like they've done here, you don't have to go out in free agency and break the bank because maybe I'm not saying it's a lesser value to keep your own, but it does seem smarter, right? And you mentioned it with the Cowboys, maybe not doing it the right way all the time, waiting for these deadlines to go and the markets to be reset. It sounds like the Jets are in the business now of kind of resetting their own, and then people can go off that number, right?
Absolutely. Well, look, the next guy up makes the most money. So the market gets just reset by the next player available. And so the next cornerback up will get the most money, and it's just the way it works.
Yep, that's just the way of the land in the NFL. And so far, the Jets keeping their own with Garrett Wilson and now Sauce Gardner. All right, Geoff, when we come back, let's talk about the AFC South. Will Houston run the roost again? That's next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Dave Ross and Geoff Schwartz here with you. Geoff, always love these conversations with you on a Monday. And again, as you well know, if you want to hear more of talk like this, you can become a VSiN Pro subscriber. And when you do, you're going to get your betting splits, your power ratings, sharp analysis like this here in the GM Shuffle, all for just $9.99 for your very first month. So all you have to do is go to VSiN.com/subscribe and check out all of the subscription options. But that's $9.99 for your first month to become a VSiN Pro subscriber. The NFL betting guide is already out for VSiN. Geoff, I know we did gave our analysis on it, who we think is going to win said divisions. I want to talk about the AFC South today because the last 2 years, it has been all Houston all the time. D'Amico Ryans comes in year number one, and then you go out there and get C.J. Stroud as your first quarterback. And it feels like the D'Amico C.J. Stroud pairing has really worked. 2 years, 2 division titles. I think it's fair to say that they should be obviously the betting favorite to win it a third year in a row. But why do you think this has worked out so quickly in turning the fortunes around for H-Town?
Well, D'Amico Ryans is a good coach and Stroud's a good football player. It's kind of simple, right? I mean, it's the NFL it can be quite simple, buddy. It might seem complex, but if I give you a good quarterback and a good coach, you win a lot of football games. It's not a hard formula out. Finding those is very hard, right? I mean, look, think about the other quarterbacks in that class, right? And where they're at, with other coaches in that class and where they're at. So that pairing works together very well. I also liked, and here's one thing that's interesting about this too. You have a defensive coach in D'Amico Ryans paired with an offensive, obviously Stroud's a quarterback. He's on the offensive side of the ball. Sometimes that doesn't always meld together, right? The defensive coach maybe holds back the offense a little bit. That's not the case in Houston. It's not why Houston didn't play well offensively last season. So it's a unique mix, right? Where you don't, a lot of times you look at the best quarterbacks in the NFL, a lot of them are offensive head coaches, right? The head coach is the offensive guy. Not in this case. So it's a good blend, right? D'Amico Ryan's young, aggressive, Stroud young, obviously. The personalities match together. So now it's a question, though, of last season wasn't as good as year one. Sophomore slumps happen. Have they done enough to get over the hump and make the third year more like the first year?
Well, let me ask you this, because I think that's an interesting parallel of a defensive-minded coach, and we're talking about the pairing with the quarterback, because it does go to Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and all the success they had for so many years. But Belichick, as we know, he was a defensive mastermind under Bill Parcells, but he has hands in everything, right? He was in those offensive meetings, and we've seen different coaches, and I'm sure you played for him, that do it differently. And it's almost like we're not involved in some of those meeting rooms. If you're an offensive-minded head coach, you're in the offensive meetings. How is that dynamic, Geoff? Because I do think people don't really fully understand that head coaches, are very different. Some oversee everything, and some only oversee their side of the ball. Do you think D'Amico has a pretty good balance of that?
So the way it has worked in my career is a defensive coach tends to be more in roaming during practice, right? They look at the defense, they look at the offense. They're not so involved. Now, we have seen defense coaches call plays, but a lot of them don't. Most offensive head coaches call plays. And that means that in practice, you're with the offense the entire time. Every offensive coach I've been with has been with the offense. And that's why a lot of times you see the successful offensive coaches, they hire a veteran defensive coordinator. I think Cheats is a great example of that, right? Where, he's had two OCs, two DCs, Bob Sutton, who was an older guy, been around forever, and then Spags, who's a former head coach. And I like that pairing, right? I like the pairing of having an older statesman defensive coach because he's by himself. He's the head coach of the defense. Then the OC head coach is with the offense the entire practice. That's how I've seen it in my career. I'm sure that's the way D'Amico Ryans does it as well. Obviously, the baby is the defense, so he will with an eye to that at all times. Sure. But that's how I've noticed it. John Fox was all over practice field. Andy Reid, only on the offensive side the entire day. So that's the difference between offensive and defensive coaches. And the one thing about having a defensive coach that is a little more difficult for someone like Stroud is that the offensive coordinators, if they do well, all leave. So you end up with having new offensive coordinators all the time. We see this in Tampa Bay right now. Yep. We're probably going to see it in Washington with Kingsbury gone after this season. The thing about Belichick, and you mentioned Belichick, is they didn't have a lot of turnover at OC. Daniels was there for a long time. Charlie Weis was there for a long time. There wasn't a lot of turnover, which is unique. A lot of times the defensive coaches that have great OCs, those guys leave. When you have obviously an offensive-minded head coach who call plays, the OC can leave as much as they want. The offensive coach is still there calling the plays. So that's a unique situation, and that's not why the OC's gone in Houston from last year. Their offense was not functionable last season.
Yeah, that's the big change there. And again, I feel like this team is, even for a two-time repeat champion in the division, people feel like they did take a slight step back. Is that all offensive line play, or is some of that on C.J. Stroud himself? Because it feels like the line play was not up to par there for H-Town last year.
So the line wasn't great last season, and I actually think it's not going to be much better this year. So that's something to note when you preview the offensive line. It was last year was a schematic issue offensively. So there's basically two ways offenses operate pass protection. Okay, the one way is the quarterback is the general. So you call it protection, you call jet. There's basically a couple of protections. You slide protection, you man protection, empty protection, right? And we all have rules in those protections. And the center comes up to the line of scrimmage. The center basically declares where we're working. And then the quarterback can basically do what he wants afterwards. And a lot of times you see Mahomes as the best one at this right now, or Rodgers does it really well. I mean, the veterans do it well. Stafford, they just point to someone else. You just go to that person. Whoever the quarterback says to go to, you go that. And what it does is it handles all the problems, right? Because the quarterback sees the secondary. They see the shell. They think the pressure's coming from a place. They can alert offensive line. You have this guy. We're hot off this guy. Wide receiver, you do this. And it allows you some freedom in your offense, okay? The other way that teams do it, and this is a lot of a Shanahan offense with younger quarterbacks, is you set it and forget it. The old Ronco commercials, right? Set it and forget it, okay? that rotisserie chicken thing, right? Is like you call it protection, and that's it. There's no adjustments made. And we see this with San Francisco. We saw with Houston last year. What happens is when you don't do that, defenses can get an idea of what you're doing based off formation and tendency. And if you're not on the same page, quarterback, wide receiver, play caller, offensive line, you get into some really big problems. You want the flexibility of being able to change what you do at the line of scrimmage based on what the defense gives you. Defenses are getting much smarter now. They're isolating offensive linemen, they're isolating running backs, and you want the opportunity to change things. And Houston's offense did not allow that. So they got in a lot of problems last season just schematically. It wasn't that guys were getting beaten. They were getting beat too. Doesn't really help if you're bad schematically and bad up front.
Right.
But a lot of it was just like it wasn't working schematically. And so I think with the offensive coordinator change, they're hoping to clean some of that up and to allow Stroud the freedom to make some more adjustment to the line of scrimmage.
Fascinating. I think you mentioned it too about offensive coordinators down in Tampa now becoming head coaches. That's what's going to happen down there in Duval because you got a new guy in Liam Cohen that's going to be taking over year number 1. And so now you look at it, and Geoff, I guess the question there, if we're projecting Jacksonville to be the second best team behind Houston, at least on paper, is can he fix – you hear this a lot, right? Can he fix Trevor Lawrence, right? And we saw about this Baker Mayfield, Dave Canales. Did he fix them? And then Liam took him to another level. What do you make of Cohen year 1 with Trevor Lawrence and maybe going into a critical year for Lawrence, even though he got the big bag last year?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a critical year because there's no allegiance to him in the front office. New front office, new head coach. Play poorly, you're out of here, buddy. We'll find someone else. So it's a big year for him professionally. Look, Liam Cohen has been good everywhere he's been. Right? He was good in Tampa. He was good with the Kentucky Wildcats. He was good with the Rams. And so I expect him to get the most out of Lawrence. But look, it does make you wonder. Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be the next it kid,
Yes.
right? He's on his third coach already. Now, Urban Meyer thing just didn't work out, of course. That happens. But Doug Peterson worked in Philly. So why is it not working with Lawrence? And so Liam Cohen's job this year is to figure that out. I worry about offensive line. They have weapons, which is pretty nice, right? They have Brian Thomas Jr. The Travis Hunter thing, I don't know what he's going to end up playing. He's listed on the depth chart, I think, is starting wide receiver, backup corner at the moment. They have good running backs. So the things are in place for him to play well this year. It's up to Lawrence to do it.
What do you make of, because we just talked about that dichotomy of, coaching. And so now first-year head coach, the defense wasn't very good at all last year either. So, he's brought in there, clearly. We know why he's brought in. He is brought in for Trevor Lawrence, get the offense humming, as you mentioned. He's been successful doing that everywhere he's gone. Is that a lot to ask for a first-year head guy to fix everything if we're looking at Jacksonville as a real contender in this division?
No, but I will say that I think it has to be done in stages. So I've mentioned this many times, I'll repeat it again for those who haven't heard it before. If you're a head coach and you have one thing you specialize in, offense, defense, or Harbaugh's like special teams, that's a team in general, is you better be good at that one thing that you specialize in. And so to me, year 1, anytime a coach comes in is fixing the thing that they specialize in. So if that's offense, year 1, the offense has to be better. Defense, year 1, defense better. Year 2 is when I think you fix the other side of the ball. Now, Jacksonville's defense, as you mentioned, wasn't terrible last season. But this year for Liam Cohen is all about, quote unquote, fixing the offense, making sure Trevor Lawrence, you get the most, I should say, out of Trevor Lawrence with the weapons he has and maybe grooming some of his offensive linemen to be future guys you can count on. So that's Liam Cohen's job in year 1, is get Trevor Lawrence and evaluate him. Maybe they determine after the year he's not our guy. There's plenty of teams that could use a Trevor Lawrence, and it's certainly possible that Jacksonville might go in that direction.
New GM, new head coach, new defensive coordinator. I mean, there are a lot of new. And obviously, when you bring in a new head coach, you're going to bring in a whole new staff. But from the front office too, Geoff, this thing had to be torn down from the top bottom, and it looks like that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it did. It had to be done. And look, I think you have to be excited about the front office right now. I know it's very young, but I like Tony Baselli being in there, Hall of Famer and a winner throughout his career. He knows what to look at in players. And so you have to feel good about, I think, what they've done with the staff, who they brought in. And again, the goal this year is to make sure Trevor Lawrence is playing his best football. But Jacksonville, to me, still feels like a pretty much a wild card team. I don't really know if they're going – I mean, can they win the division? Sure. I mean, if Liam Cohen gets the most out of Trevor Lawrence, absolutely. But we haven't seen that yet. And Trevor Lawrence feels like a quarterback that you get his best one day, then you don't get his best. So that to me is the biggest issue they have to figure out.
If you go back just a couple seasons ago, this was a team late in the year that was on track to have the number 1 seed with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. Remember? And then he injured his ankle. He had a high ankle sprain. And he really feels like he's been off kilter since then. And since then, as I mentioned, new GM, new head coach. And so now really you feel like If he's healthy, he's got to show this year with a guy like Liam Cohen as a head coach, or else I wonder if the next change in Jacksonville would be at the quarterback position. When we come back, let's talk about the other two teams in this division, the Colts and the Titans. They're under the microscope next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle. Dave Ross and Geoff Schwartz here with you on this Monday as we keep breaking down the AFC South. And it's been a lot of fun, Geoff, going through these divisions with you here all summer long. Let's continue now on the two teams that I think people expect to be the bottom feeders in this division. That'd be the Colts and the Tennessee Titans. Let's start with Indy. And I think we saw the move there from Daniel Jones. Remember the Giants rather let him go. He goes to Minnesota to end the year. And then you knew he was going to end up somewhere. And he ends up there in Indianapolis, where they already have Anthony Richardson. Richardson's got some shoulder issues. Don't know about how his long-term prognosis is going to go. But I want to start there. What do you make of bringing in a guy like Daniel Jones when, if you drafted your franchise quarterback 2 years ago in the top 5, clearly he's got to be looking over his shoulder going, oh, that guy, he was a top 10 pick too, just like me.
So what was the one thing everyone said about Richardson when he was drafted? Do you remember what it was?
He needed reps.
Have the Colts given him those reps?
They've tried to, but the injuries are getting in the way of the reps.
Not last season. They benched him last season.
They did bench him.
They did not commit to the plan, right, of letting him develop. So you benched him, and Flacco wasn't very good. So then Flacco was out, and Richardson came back. And Richardson was terrible last season. He completed 47% of his passes, which is atrocious. But we have to understand, again, Dave, they didn't let him develop. And maybe they determined early on he just wasn't very good. But you drafted a developmental quarterback and did not let him develop. So now you bring in Daniel Jones. It just feels like everyone's trying to save their job, right? This is job saving. Because if it doesn't work out this year, everyone's gone. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to save their job. Now, Daniel Jones in a Shane Steichen offense, I think will be fine, okay? But the problem with fine is that in those big moments of big games, fine is not good enough to win, right? So you can win with fine in the first quarter, the second quarter, but 2-minute drive to end the first half, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, fourth quarter, fine typically gets you beat. And so that's what I worry about with Indy, is that I think Daniel Jones will be fine. He'll be fine in the offense, but in those big moments, is he good enough to make it happen? Now, I'm not saying Anthony Richardson was going to make it happen, but they never even really gave him a chance. So they have weapons. They drafted Tyler Warren, who I really like. Their offensive line is fine. It's not terrible. It's not great. There's some good players on the offensive line. Obviously, Quentin Nelson there. I like their running back, of course, Jonathan Taylor. No surprise there. So I think Jones will be fine. But fine is 9 and 8, right? Fine is 8, 9, 7, and 10. That's what fine is at quarterback.
We talk about a lot of changes, and certainly normally skilled players. What we talk about is certain coaching and even GMs. But the sudden passing of Jim Irsay as the owner, it's going to obviously be staying in the family. Very sad news. I think very unexpected news, obviously, and a shock in Indianapolis. Geoff, from an ownership perspective, even though it is still in the Irsay family there, how much does that affect? Because it feels like he had a big say in maybe bringing in a Daniel Jones, right? This was not an absentee owner. And then you go from that and you got to fill the void with people that have not done what the late Jim Irsay did.
Well, the best owners don't make personnel decisions. So if this ends up being where I believe his daughter took over, right? His daughter, the 3 daughters, right? They all have different roles in the organization. I'm firmly of the belief that the general manager and the player personnel director should be in charge of personnel. It's their job. It's what they spend their time doing. An owner is brought into the equation when it comes to drafting a first-round quarterback. That owner should have to vet that quarterback. That guy is the face of your franchise. I'm on board with that. Even if you go get a Kirk Cousins, if you're the Falcons, Arthur Blank should probably have to know about that. But Arthur Blank shouldn't have to know about the right guard you're bringing in. He shouldn't be part of Daniel Jones, Arthur Richardson, Anthony Richardson playing. I don't think Irsay, I've said this at the time, I don't think he should have been involved in that discussion at all. That should be a Chris Ballard decision or a Shane Steichen decision. So I'm not sure it really manifests itself now, but in the offseason, if the Colts front office is just making decisions themselves. And again, what's reported is an involvement might not be what actually happens, Dave, as we know. So
Yeah.
Irsay might say he's involved in it, but really he's not. But that's where it changes, right? It changes from the fact that that eye is not watching over. Now, the one who like sort of worked, I mean, Al Davis like was watching film. I don't think
Yes.
Irsay is watching film quite like Davis was. So I'm not a belief that owners should be part of the personnel decisions.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see year one. I'm sure it's going to be an emotional week one against Miami there to celebrate his life in passing. But yes, it's going to be a new look organization now with the siblings and the offspring certainly running the show with the passing of Jim Mora. What about now down in Tennessee? Because big news here is not just that they had the number one pick and they go get Cam Ward out of Miami as the first overall pick, but then we did hear news today that Will Levis, who was a second round pick just a couple of years ago, opted to have surgery on his shoulder, and he will be shut down for the remainder of the year. So if you looked at that and said, well, if the kid's not ready, you could always go back to Will Levis. Didn't look great in the 2 years he was there. I just wonder, Geoff, when you hear that news, maybe there was a time frame as to why he chose to get the surgery now. And I wonder if maybe this is the last we've seen him now with the changing at the guard anyway, with the first overall pick that took his job.
Yeah, so the timing of this feels very much like I want to get paid for this season and then just be ready to play next year and not have to be released at the end of training camp. I don't know what his contract situation was like about whether or not he was going to, be out some money. He was a second round pick, and those contracts can vary in guarantees once you get past the first or second season. But he could have done this surgery months ago, I would imagine. The reports are basically that it was his decision to get it done. And that means that he could have done it, I would think, months ago. But this way he'll be healthy when free agency rolls around next season. He'll get paid for this year. He won't even be in the building, most likely. I mean, maybe he'll do some rehab in the building, but I imagine that he'll probably do rehab elsewhere, and it immediately becomes Cam Ward's team, which it was anyways, right? It was Cam Ward's team. Cam Ward is the least talked about first pick overall ever, in my opinion.
Amazing.
No one's even talking about him. But this clears up any competition that there was competition, man. I tell you what, Will Levis last year, buddy, he had just horrific turnovers. Like, I was on Tennessee a bunch last season, +3, +4, some of these home dogs.
Oh.
And he single-handedly lost them games. So just having Cam Ward there to not lose them games and just take what's in front of them, and there's some rebuilding still to be done there, will make the team so much better early on.
We talk about transitions in front offices and beyond, obviously with Indianapolis. How about Rand Carthon? He's been run out of the building there. And you remember just 2 years ago when Mike Vrabel stepped aside, it felt like that was a power struggle there. And it was won by Carthon when he was the GM. And then he is out the door year number 2 for Brian Callahan. So this is a weird juxtaposition that you bring in Mike Borganza rather as the new GM. From the Chiefs. So he comes in and he's inheriting the head coach. So we talk about inheriting quarterbacks and this sort of thing. Is there pressure now on Brian in year number 2?
Yes.
With a first-year quarterback, even though that was now the new pick here of the new regime?
Yes. If he doesn't win, he's out. I think it's that simple. I mean, again,
wow.
We see the pairing right so often, general manager, head coach, for a reason, right? I mean, you want them to be together and make that pick. I think ideally you would like a general manager to choose the head coach, unless it's a head coach of a certain quality where you might choose him first and let him choose the general manager he wants to work with. But Brian Callahan has no personnel decision-making process, right? I would imagine. So you really want those guys to marry up. And yes, it comes down to wins and losses. Now, again, I think Borganti's done a good job of trying to add pieces to make this an easier year for Callahan. Obviously, it comes down to Ward. They can go 6-11, but Ward is showing signs of playing well, and Callahan might keep his job, right? I mean, it comes down to, I think, the development of Cam Ward.
That's the interesting part because, again, it's just year number 2 for Brian Callahan, year number 1, obviously, for the rookie quarterback. And you're going to throw Cam right in the fire, right? And obviously, we mentioned the Will Levis news off the top. There really is no competition at this position. Geoff, you can go back historically. so many different ways to get there. Guys that sit. Patrick Mahomes didn't play to that final game in year number one. Played the last game, and then Alex Smith was out of a job. I go back to Troy Aikman. They put him in the fire right away, and he got destroyed. His body got destroyed in that first year, and yet he goes on to win through 3 Super Bowls once he healed up. Is there, for you as a lineman, do you not mind a rookie single caller behind you? Obviously, you'd always like to have a veteran, but how does that process work out as to when to start him and when not to play him?
Well, it's Cam Ward, Brandon Allen, and Tim Boyle right now. So I think by default, Cam Ward gets the job. Look, early on, I think whether a guy has it or not. They come in the huddle, you can tell they're confident. I mean, I play with rookies that I won't throw anyone under the bus. Like immediately, you're like, nope, out on that, not going to work.
Wow.
Cam Ward, his personality, I think, leads people to believe in him. He was at Miami 1 year, and look how much better that team was. Washington State. I mean, he worked his way up from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami to be the first pick in the draft. So obviously, along the way, people believed in him, and he returned that by playing well on the football field. So I think he immediately becomes a starter. But I will say, I think ideally, look, if I had to choose, like the Mahomes route is perfect, right? You sit behind a veteran. Now they were winning though, so it's easy to do that. You sit, you wait a year, you start. 3 years feels like a lot for Rodgers and Love. But they're not afford that break. They don't have anyone else to play right now. He's drafted 1 overall. He's got to play. And so I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think if given the circumstance where you can let him sit for a little bit, you want to do that, but it's not going to happen here.
Caleb Williams, obviously, first overall pick a year ago, starts right away. Jaden Daniels starts right away. Drake May got in there in just a short order there in New England. So, Geoff, that's where the trend is going, though, right? And normally when you're drafting that high, that's because you've been unsuccessful. So you got to see what you have and find out sooner than later. And even Will Levis, as a second rounder, he did get opportunity. He just didn't take advantage of those opportunities when he got the starting time.
Well, when I came to the NFL in 2008, even a first-round pick, you waited to play a little bit. You weren't given the job the first day. And now, because coaches, I think, are just, their job's not as secure. They got to play these guys now. And teams are trying to strike so quickly to win a championship as soon as possible that there is no more waiting. So first-round picks, I mean, you're immediately starting now. So Cam Ward, no surprise. Even if Will Levis was hurt, he's still in right away.
Yep, this is a new day and age here, and when you drafted that highly, you're probably playing year number 1. Even if you're ready or not, you're going to find out sink or swim time there. When we come back, I want to talk about what's going on with the NFLPA and get your thoughts there. Some interesting moves. That's next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle. Dave Ross and Geoff Schwartz here with you on this Monday. And Geoff, this is kind of a little bit off the beaten path, so I had to put my glasses on and make sure I get this story right, because the NFLPA, I'll show my age a little bit here. I used to, during the lockouts, when D. Smith was running it, I used to have a lot of conversations with D, and I kind of got a behind-the-scene look of how things work inside of those offices for the NFLPA. But I'm a little bit confused now, because Lloyd Howell Jr., who had served as the executive director since 2023, he abruptly resigned over some conflict of interest concerns that maybe we're having there. It could actually lead to some very serious charges with FBI investigations there. And then we saw that the chief strategy officer, J.C. Tretter, is resigning from his post and has withdrawn himself from consideration to be the new guy now that job has opened up. So don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but Geoff, this is very tumultuous at the top of a very important governing body, if you will, for the players in the NFLPA. And I'm sure you know this as a player and now as a former player. What do you make of these changes at the top?
Much needed. It had to happen. So, there's been some reporting over the last month or so from Pablo Torre and Mike Florio uncovering 2 separate, essentially court rulings, right? Court cases. They were in arbitration, but 2 of them. One was an arbiter. We talked about this before, right? Ruled that the NFL Management Council basically told the teams not to give the Deshaun Watson contract out. That's collusion. But they did determine that no one acted on that advice explicitly. So the NFLPA actually lost that ruling. And then there was a confidentiality agreement entered where this was not going to be made public. Now, that's important to note because how great would it be if an agent entering this free agency period knew that the NFL was colluding against their clients? That would be great leverage to have for players. Okay. Then a second settlement or second case was released that the NFL, I guess, had essentially accused players of faking injuries to leverage contracts and get money. And they cited J.C. Treader on a podcast saying players should fake injuries to miss the offseason program, essentially miss training camp. So after those two things, the NFL players were voting on a new leader. And plus, there's also stuff with Howell where he used money, NFLPA money, to go to strip clubs.
Yeah.
There were other incidents from previous jobs that were under question. And basically it came down to, how is he not vetted? Like how do you allow someone to run the PA who's not vetted this way? And also, too, it's worth pointing out that, so, you basically have management, right, and labor. Those are the two sides of, like, in a business, right? And the players are labor and the owners are management, correct? Howell has always represented and been part of management. He's never been a labor person. So it was an odd hire to hire someone who never really was on the labor side. He was on the management side. You've come to find out he works for a group that consults for the NFL. Again, the management side, right? So it never made sense when you do the research on it. And as more people started paying attention, this is the number one problem in the NFLPA. No one pays attention. And my solution to that, it's not a great solution because I know it's untenable, is the NFL needs their superstars to be part of the union. You need Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen to be part of the union. It would wake guys up to what's happening, that people would pay attention more to what's happening behind the scenes. And as more information came out about the role, presumably that J.C. Treader played in this, and what appeared his gunning for this executive position once Howell resigned, he decided to resign. And look, I read the article that he gave to Jonathan Jones for CBS Sports. I don't know, man. I don't know how much I believe it. Basically, he said, for the most part, he had nothing to do with anything bad that happened. The odd part was about this is the executive committee voted 10-1 to not hire Howell and hire the other candidate for the head job once Steve Smith stepped down. And yet they did not tell the players their recommendation for how to vote.
Wow.
I don't get that. You vote 10-1 and then you just don't tell anyone that you wanted the other candidate who you thought was better for the job. So look, it's time to wipe the slate clean. It's time to go find better leadership for our PA and get more players involved and understanding what's happening behind the scenes.
Very odd, the timing of it and the what's coming out now. And I'm with you, by the way. And my good buddy Lorenzo Alexander played, double-digit numbers of years in the league. He was on the NFLPA at one point. And again, I go back to the D. Smith era. But I'm with you on the former player thing. I think it would be better, or current players, to be on board to really know what's going on, because it sounds like people are waking up today going, what was going on? And the players should have a better understanding of what's going on in their own league. That's for sure. Go ahead. Sorry, Geoff.
Last point. Think about it. The best leader we've had was Gene Upshaw, right?
Yes.
Hall of Famer, former offensive lineman. Like, that is what he's a Hall of Famer, correct? I believe he is, right?
Yes.
He should be. Yeah. So for the Raiders. So like that is what we need. I know it's hard to convince former players that have made millions of dollars to want to head the labor union. But it would do such wonders for us if we had that person in charge of our PA. So if any former players are listening to this that want to run the PA, please step up and do so.
I echo those sentiments, Geoff. I think it's very well said and spot on. Kind of a new phenomenon going on. Only one first-round pick has not been signed his contract, Shamar Stewart, with the Cincinnati Bengals. So everybody's pretty much there except for Cincy. But the second-round picks, not signing rather their picks. We still have 8 guys, Geoff, in the second round that are unsigned. What do you make of this? We always talk about resetting the market and slotting and all those sort of things. This feels like a relatively new phenomenon. What's going on with the second round picks not getting their deals done?
So for forever, the rookie wage scale, first round picks contracts were guaranteed, second round picks were not. And this is the first year where the top 2 second round picks got guaranteed contracts. So from then on, the rest of the players, the agents, right, they wanted their players to have guaranteed contracts for second round picks. And so that's been the holdup. Now, as we're seeing this happen right now, and this is from the other day. I don't know if anyone's signed quite yet, but pick 33, 34, 35, 37, 38, 39. I've gotten 100% of their contracts guaranteed. Tyler Shuck is at 40. Most likely will be guaranteed as well. Now 36 is Judkins, who is not signing at the moment with his off-field deal, so off-field issues. So we're seeing second round picks. So the holdup was this, right? There's going to be a line in the sand drawn where I don't think every second round pick will get a guaranteed contract this season. So the line I will be somewhere, and that might mean someone holds out for a little bit or whatnot. But it does feel like it won't happen for all the second round picks. But that's what's holding this up right now. So it's a good development, right? I mean, anytime you get guaranteed money, you have to love it.
We've talked about this before on the show, and yes, I know this. Even you know this too. Just like you want to go do your job, you want to work, but you have agents involved. You're talking to management about getting deals done for these players that they are chomping at the bit to get there, do what they got to do, and the agent might be saying, "Just we gotta wait." How big of a setback can that be if we're not getting in camp here as we get closer to August?
Well, it can absolutely be a setback, and I do wonder. So the players now, at their 18 and 21-year-olds, they're in college that get drafted. They are more business savvy than ever before because of NIL and because they're getting paid at an earlier age. And so I think they realize the power they have as a business person, and those decisions they're making are not panic decisions. So they're okay with missing a week or two of training camp if it proves a point, if they're able to get what they want, because they understand the value in what they bring. Right, forever we didn't have the opportunity to have a value coming out of college like these kids do, and some of them, Dave. I mean, a quarterback, a second round pick, they're already making multiple $1 million in college. So there's no rush, I think, to sign a bad contract, sign a contract that's not worth it. Shamar Stewart's the one obviously not signing in the first round. He made money in college. Most guys are begging their agents to sign by training camp so you get the signing bonus to show up and hit the direct deposit. These guys now have a little bit of money. I think there's not the urgency that they feel to get a deal done because of that.
I can go way back to the early to mid 90s covering camp for the then Washington Redskins, and Heath Schuler was the big pick, 5th overall. Redskins are waiting for him to come in, and he had a delay at the beginning back then when you didn't have all what we're talking about with slotted and first round picks guaranteed and all this stuff. And he missed time at camp, and basically Gus Frerotte, this unknown 7th round pick out of Tulsa, kind of ended up taking his job. And people go back to, I don't know if it's fair to do that. They go back to that in a specific case like Heath and say it was because of those origins that he started off in the league behind the 8 ball. Is that fair? And I wonder if any of these guys we're talking about now, if they do get off to a slow start, that they were going to go, see, this is the reason why it was over money. And that's why now the player hasn't developed to where they need to be. Or is that just making up an excuse?
It's certainly fair to feel that way. And it might be the case, but I'll tell you what, man, look, you're either good or you're not, like it's sort of that simple, right?
Yeah.
If you miss a week of camp and that makes you not be successful in the NFL, you weren't made to be in the NFL, right? Now, of course, there are guys like myself that needed every practice rep possible. I could not miss a practice, right? I got worse if I didn't miss a practice. But I was probably making it because I was good. Like it just was going to happen. And it took a different path than most guys do, but we all have our own path to get there. If Heath Schuler was that good, he would be playing or would have played longer in the NFL, right? It's that simple. And I think now, too, teams do defer to giving their draft picks more of an opportunity. So if you come in a week late, you get an opportunity to play, right? And it's the way it is. So if you're that good, Dave, your week off, you're about to have 2 weeks off. You're so good, you're right back in the seat in 3 weeks. Like, we know that, you've proven that over the years. So, look, that's the way it works, right?
Yeah. If you got it, you got it. And you're right. Like, we know why you excelled, and that practice did make perfect on your end. Geoff, appreciate that. By the way, I will be off for the next 2 weeks, but I will be back with you from a new location at the newest Circa in Franklin, Kentucky. Geoff, appreciate you. Thanks for joining us, everybody, here on the GM Shuffle.